Hello, this is your brain on drugs, and this is a punk rock psychiatrist. Today's episode, I'm going to round out the lifestyle stuff. I'm going to kind of rush through the last ones. We did a ton of stuff on nutrition, and then we had one pretty good sized episode on physical activity. And then we're going to kind of wrap up just with a little bit with the last few factors. And one reason why I'm not going to spend more time on this is because I'm going to devote a whole season to sleep, a whole season, well, to substance abuse. So I just wanted to kind of touch on some highlights today. And also just keeping in mind, like, all this stuff can affect obesity because we're talking about obesity medicine in this series. Um, Obesity can affect mental health. That's why we're talking about it. It affects all sorts of different medical issues, and all these different lifestyle factors are contributing to that. And I think people think about one or two of them, but then they don't think about all of them. You get, I think there's this huge myth out there that you can just like exercise everything off, which is completely false. Um, most most of the weight stuff is going to be controlled by diet. That's why I spent so much time on it. Exercise contributes to maintaining weight loss and converting, unhealthy weight into healthier weight. It helps with motivation, mental health, things like that. And then we're going to talk about sleep. And I think sleep is something that people often forget about. I feel like it's the one thing that no one addresses. Everyone's kind of like, yeah, I got to eat better. And maybe they eventually do, or at least for a period of time. They're like, yeah, I got to exercise. And so they do. And then it's been, yeah, I gotta stop smoking and drinking. Yeah, those aren't good for me. And they actually do it. And so, like, as hard as it is, people actually do make attempts on that. But how many people say, man, I got to get more sleep? And then they actually do it. I mean, most people if do not. Like, this is a huge issue. Most people want more sleep, but they also want more time in the day. And what they'll usually do is they will sacrifice sleep for time in the day. And they will, you can function and survive on not enough sleep for years and years and years, just like you can function on a really crappy diet and not exercising, but you're going to pay the piper. All right. So, and I think people think, well, I'm getting 5 or 6 hours and I get through the day. And it's like, you probably need to simplify your life if you're not able to get enough sleep. I think in today's world, it's harder to do that. I've seen these studies. We'll talk about this when we talk about sleep, but back in like the 60s, people were getting like 9 hours of sleep. And my guess is because they probably didn't have a whole lot else to do. There was, three channels on the TV, no internet, um, not a lot of phone activity. I mean, you could call somebody, but like we didn't have like any screens or anything like that other than like a TV, and you just kind of had to live with whatever was on when it was on, and there wasn't stuff on at 1 o'clock in the morning. Like, they there wasn't even programming at that time. So, and I think a lot of other things, they were just simpler, and people had time for sleep and they slept. And so, I mean, these are, like, my parents actually lived during that time. And so, like, in like basically a generation, we went from getting enough sleep to not getting enough sleep. And we just kind of normalize it like it's okay. And I've talked to a lot of patients that it sounds like they're doing good on their exercise and their diet, but they're still not losing weight. And I say, well, what about your sleep? And they're like, I'm not sleeping. And I'm like, well, perhaps that's the problem. So let's, I just go through some highlights. Okay. So, like I said, we're going to go through this in detail. I'm going to tell you how to do sleep, CBTI. I know it's like a big thing. Like, there's not enough people to do CBTI. I mean, you can do it yourself if you learn the principles and are disciplined. We'll go over that in detail. We'll talk about, all the non-medical things you can do to improve your sleep. We'll talk about all the medications that are approved and, used off label for sleep. We'll have like probably a good 15, 16 episodes on sleep. So just to kind of talk about lifestyle stuff today, um, one of the most important things you can do with your sleep is to go to sleep and wake up at the same time every day, within 30 to 60 minutes. And there's actually some evidence out there that if you have a 90 plus difference, a 90 plus minute difference, it could increase your heart disease risk by twofold, right? So for those of you that are like, getting up at 6 o'clock Monday through Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday, getting up at, man, even like 8, you're increasing your risk of heart disease. And I think a lot of folks are doing that. And it's like your brain, it wants to stay consistent. Um, I get pretty consistent sleep. I go to bed pretty much the same time every day and wake up at the same time every day, but I do travel frequently. And so I change time zones a lot. And so I don't know, what is, how, that's going to hurt me. Right. And it's something that I kind of decide to do, because it's what I enjoy. And, even if I change time zones by 3 hours, if I'm doing it every few weeks, that's a 90-minute difference in when I fall asleep, perhaps. So I would, you got to keep this in mind. And like this can affect your weight as well. Like, how is it affecting your heart? It's affecting your cardiovascular system in some way. Um, when we talk about sleep apnea, I mean, you'll see that the connection between sleep apnea and cardiovascular health is huge. It's probably the biggest reason to do something about it. All right. And then how much sleep to get for most people? 7 to 8. And I've heard 7 to 9. Um, if you get too much sleep, it can be a bad thing. If you get too little sleep, it can be a bad thing. Um, there are outliers that require less sleep and require a lot more sleep, but the vast majority of people, I mean, but previously I had heard 6 to 8, and recently that's kind of been raised to 7 to 9. And so this 6 to 7 is, for the vast majority of people, not going to be enough for your health. You're going to need at least 7. So 7 to 9 is the best range to stay in there. And I think not many people are getting that. Not many. And so that can make a big difference. And then earlier sleep tends to be better, shooting for a midpoint of the night around 4 a.m. All right. So, I mean, a lot of people wake up at 5 or 6 a.m. So, like, 4 a.m. is not going to be their midpoint. And for me, I'm like the opposite. I go to bed super late and wake up super late. And so I think 4 a.m. is actually kind of on the early side for me. So, generally, for most people, want to shoot for around 4 a.m. being the middle. Um, and then and a very important thing is, do you have a subjective feeling that your sleep was restorative for you? Do you feel refreshed? Or do you feel alert during the day? Do you feel sleepy during the day? Um, these can be signs that your sleep is inadequate. Another thing, and when we talk about CBTIs, which is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, we will talk about sleep efficiency. Now, generally, we're shooting for sleep efficiency in the 80 to 90% range. What does that mean? That means that you are asleep 80 to 90% of the time that you're in bed trying to sleep. So if it's more than 90%, that means that you're definitely not getting enough sleep. Because, like, you hit the pillow, you knock out, you wake up in the morning, you've got to get up. You need to be lying in bed, not sleeping more than 10% of the time. That's a sign that you have not been getting enough sleep. Um, if you're getting less than 80%, you're probably lying in bed too long, or there's something wrong with your sleep. Why are you not sleeping the time that you're actually there? So when we do sleep CBTI, generally, if you're over 90%, we say, you should be in bed trying to sleep more. If you're at less than 80%, then you want to be in bed less. Okay. So, um, being greater than 80% would be important. All right. And then, Getting adequate sleep improves mental health, heart health, diabetes, healthy weight, all of these metabolic factors in addition to mental health. It's, like I said, super important, and it's the thing that people really neglect, probably more than anything, because it's like there's just not enough hours in the day for people to do all the things that they take on. And that's where I would say, you need to put sleep up there as one of your highest priorities. And that may knock some other stuff off, and that's okay. Get rid of that other stuff. Um, the sleep is more important, but I mean, people's priorities are what their priorities are, and you decide what your own priorities are. I would advise that you increase the amount of sleep you get being a higher priority, especially if you are looking to have a longer, healthier, more enjoyable life. All right. So that's sleep. Like I said, we'll cover that in detail. Probably, I'm gonna do that season next. So in a few months, we'll finish either the ADHD or obesity medicine series, and we'll start talking about sleep and anxiety. Those will be the two topics I hit next. So next, toxins. This is another thing with lifestyle medicine. We want to get rid of toxins, and let's talk about smoking and vaping. Um, in the U.S., at least, smoking, everyone knows it's bad, and people aren't doing it really anymore. We're down to like 8% of the population. I mean, a generation ago, we were upwards of like 60%. And so massive strides made to decrease smoking. But now vaping's on the rise. It's probably, I mean, I would say almost certainly not as bad as smoking, but certainly not without harm. I'll have episodes on smoking and vaping in detail, but I just want to throw up this one slide that I'm reading off here. So, kind of, we all know about smoking, how bad it is. I think a lot of people don't realize how bad vaping is. So, let's talk about vaping and mental health. So, frequent vaping is associated with a 2.4-fold increase odds of depression. There's a higher frequency of vaping is associated with more severe depression. So, the more you vape, the more severe your depressive symptoms are. Vaping is associated with worsened mood, anxiety, suicidal ideation, and overall mental health. Dual use with smoking has even worse results. And this is a big problem. A lot of people do both. That's a big issue. They decrease their smoking and they think, oh, if I vape, it's better, but I can't completely give up smoking. Sometimes I smoke. This is like, I think this is like something that most people don't realize, that it could be less harmful to just smoke and not vape than it is to do both. So it's like, if you have to do one or the other and you cannot quit, and you can quit, but if you cannot quit, um, if you cannot completely get rid of that smoking, you may not be doing yourself any favors by just vaping more, smoking less, kind of thing. You get worse results with doing both. And that's not just mental health, but that's also your lung health as well. They've shown that your risks of like COPD are higher if you do both. And I don't know, what is it, like one cigarette a month, one cigarette a week? Like what is the threshold where doing both starts causing more problems? I'm sure one cigarette a year wouldn't do anything. Like how, like where's the level? I don't think we know. I would just be really cautious if you're using both. I would, consider not doing that. Um, Try to get off those cigarettes completely. Don't keep them around. If you want to use vaping as a method of quitting smoking, it can help some people. Better to not do either one. But if you're going to use it, get rid of the cigarettes. Okay. All right. So, smoking cessation is linked to better mental health. Um, I mean, I've got articles on all of these. Let's see, the one that one is change in mental health after smoking cessation, systemic review, and meta-analysis. So I've got studies to back all these up. Former smokers with current e-cigarette use do not show an improvement in depressive symptoms, as is seen with those that are not current e-cigarette users. So essentially, if you're switching from smoking to vaping and you've made a complete switch, not smoking at all anymore, just vaping, there's no improvement in mental health. So whatever mental health detriment you had from the smoking, you're going to have the same detriment from the vaping. And when I talk about vaping in the distant future, um, vaping actually, rather than smoking, definitely is not as bad for your lungs and your heart and a lot of other stuff. But here's a study showing for mental health, I don't know, how much impact does it have on mental health? Well, I mean, we already saw above frequent vaping is associated with 2.4 times increased odds of depression. And, 2.4 times increased odds of something that's rare is not a big deal. Depression's not rare. A lot of people have depression, 10 to 20%, maybe, at least. And so 2.4 increased odds of depression is a massive increase. And so if you do make the switch to vaping, you're not really doing your mental health any favor. Okay. And then I've got this cool chart over here that kind of shows what these like ratios are. So on the left column, I've got smoking status, and on the right column, I've got depressive symptoms percentage. So this is like how many people are going to have depressive symptoms. So if you're a never smoker, 5.49% of people having depressive symptoms. Currently smoking, 12.5. All right, so quite a bit more than double. Former smoker, 5.77. So you're pretty much back to baseline if you used to smoke and quit smoking. So like if you quit smoking, you're giving yourself the same the same chance of depression as if you never smoked before. So that's awesome. And then e-cigarette use, which another word for vaping. If you don't use e-cigarettes, 6.59% with depression, and if you do, 14.69. So that's where that 2.4 increased odds are. You're going from 6.5% of people with depression to 14.69% with depression. And at least with the smoking, you may be thinking, well, maybe it's not the cigarettes, maybe it's just like the kind of people that smoke. But then when we see people that quit, we see their rates returning. I don't have a statistic on if you used to vape and now you don't. But like we didn't used to have vaping at all until like a decade ago. So and then some people not vaping versus vaping, I mean, it's a pretty big difference here. And then here's a really massive one. So this is former smokers, um, and whether they've now transitioned to e-cigarettes or not. So former smoker, and you're not using e-cigarettes, 5.55% depression. So that's like close to our baseline. And then former smokers by e-cigarette use, now we're not smoking at all, but we're using e-cigarettes, 16.1%. That's, I mean, that's that's higher. Like, what's interesting here is that the e-cigarette use actually has higher numbers than the smoking, because the smokers are 12.5%, the e-cigarettes are 14.69%, and then the former smokers who vape now are 16.1%. So like the group that's doing the worst here are our e-cigarette users that used to smoke. And then I mean, look, the ones that used to smoke, but they're like 5.5, 5.7% that are not using something else. So a lot of benefit here on the mental health. I know this didn't have a lot to do with obesity. Um, in fact, smoking may actually be associated with lower weight, but it is worse. It's about the worst thing you can do for your cardiovascular health, and obesity is bad for your cardiovascular health. And so, you may not be obese, but you're having the consequences of as if you were even worse with smoking. So that's one toxin. And let's talk about alcohol consumption. Um, this is something that like I see a lot more of now. There's a study that came out. We're going to talk about this. So when I went to medical school, they basically told us that if you drink, I think this is what I remember from the lecture we had on this. If you drink like one drink per week, you have improved outcomes like mortality, cardiovascular health than if you don't drink at all. If you drink one drink per day, it's like basically the same risk as if you didn't drink at all. And then if you drink two drinks, it's like worse. And so I was kind of like, well, who only drinks one drink per week that drinks, you know? So like, if you drink almost never, you have an improvement, and then if you drink a tiny bit, you're basically like outweighing the risk. Like you've like your benefit, you're getting this benefit, and then you increase your drinking a little bit more. By the time we get to one drink a day, we're basically back to as if we hadn't drank at all, which made me think like, oh, I can drink one drink a day and there's like no downside. But then like they generally say that two for men or one for women per day was like the cutoff of like if you do more than that, you're really doing damage. But we've since gotten more information that kind of throws this out the window. We're not this is not the case. We've figured out there was an issue, so let's talk about it. So the previous large population based studies have shown a link between light to moderate alcohol use and cardiovascular benefit with this J shaped curve, right? Where we're like, we're dropping our risk as we're drinking, and then it's coming back up again as our drinking gets to be over a certain level. Um, Very low levels have moderate risk. Moderate levels, 4 to 7 drinks per week, show the lowest mortality. I mean, that's a little bit more than I just said because I said one. But of course, I said 7 was the cutoff per week. So, like, less than 7 have this lowest mortality. And then more drinks led to higher mortality. And this is a study from 2017 here with the J shaped curve. And then 2022 comes along. JAMA puts out an article um, called, what is it called? Association of Habitual Alcohol Intake with Risk of Cardiovascular Disease, JAMA Network Open 2022 from Bittinger et al. And what we've got here is light, moderate consumption associated with a healthier lifestyle factors. Okay. So it's like, oh, it wasn't the alcohol at those smaller levels that were actually giving the benefit. It just so happens that most people that have that low alcohol intake also are non-smokers, have healthier weight, have increased physical activity, more vegetable consumption, less red meat consumption, and self-reported and self-report their health to be better. So our healthiest people drink a tiny bit, and so it's not the drinking that is actually giving this, it's not this like moderate level of 4 to 7 drinks per week that's giving the lowest mortality. It's the kind of people that drink 4 to 7 drinks per week tend to be living the healthiest lifestyles. And so in spite of their drinking, they're doing better. And so that kind of goes together. And the people that um, maybe drink less than that or drink more than that actually tend to have worse lifestyle. And so this is something from like the blue zone thing where they were looking at like what's something that these the blue zones, the longevity places like Okinawa where I live, and not anymore, by the way. This is the least healthy part of Japan now, but in the past, and we have a lot of centenarians, 100-year-old folks here. um, but soon they'll be gone and they'll be replaced by the people that took on the American diet after World War II, and the people that grew up during that time, with all the American influence of all the bad diet stuff. So Okinawa Blue Zone, Sardinia. There's like a part of Sardinia, like the mountainous areas of Sardinia. It's an island in the Mediterranean, part of Italy. And then you've got there's an island in Crete, not Crete, sorry, Greece. I think it's like Icaros or something like that. And then there's Nicoya. It's like this part of Costa Rica. Also now apparently has like the highest ratio of fast food restaurants to population. But like so the old healthy people, same thing happening to them like happened in Okinawa. They are not being replaced by more healthy people. And then the Loma Linda folks, the Seventh Day Adventists that live in like the Los Angeles area. These were the blue zones, right? This is this like Dan Buettner National Geographic thing, and what the characteristics were like, these people are active, you know, a lot of time they're walking up like hills and things. They are eating mostly plant-based diet with fish and minimal meat. They have good social structure, and they consume moderate amounts of alcohol, other than the Loma Linda folks, because Seventh Day Adventists don't drink. But the other groups all kind of have like a alcohol culture of like, you know, a little bit of a drink with dinner kind of thing. And so I think that's the group. Like the people that live like really healthy lifestyles tend to drink a tiny amount. And if you have a really healthy lifestyle and you drink a tiny amount, if you're one of these people, it's probably not harming you at all. In fact, it could even be helping you. There's studies that show that a little bit of alcohol use can relieve anxiety. It can relieve social anxiety. It can improve your, you know, in social relationships are so important. This is another thing that people might be neglecting, especially in today's world. We'll talk about that in a second. But uh, the alcohol it can facilitate like socializing and things like that. And so there are benefits to it, and often those benefits outweigh the costs that they're causing. And so if you're doing all the other lifestyle factors and you're drinking this like low moderate amount, you're not getting any downside. But some people, of course, can't control their drinking, and if they try to drink a little bit, they will drink a lot. And so those are people that shouldn't be drinking at all. And so alcohol consumption is kind of a sticky issue. Um, However, what is clear is that no amount of alcohol gives you any kind of physical health benefits whatsoever. If you're doing better, it's because you're doing other things right. It's not the alcohol. The alcohol doesn't help you at all. This whole red wine thing, that this is all nonsense. However, if you're doing a lot of other healthy things and you're drinking moderately, it's not hurting you. Okay, you're kind of making up for it. And if you quit, it's probably not going to do much of a difference for you. So, I'm not encouraging people to drink, but if you drink a small amount, it could be helping you socially. It could be, you know, giving you some pleasure in life, and it's probably, you know, if you're doing everything else right, it's not going to be harming you. Like I said, these blue zones, they all kind of have these like low to moderate alcohol consumption benefits. However, the alcohol itself is a toxin, and it's not doing anything good inside your body. So these all these theories about, oh, you know, there's the tannins, or I don't know what the heck, you know, stuff that's in there that's supposed to be like decreasing blood clots and all that stuff. Like this is overall no benefit. Okay. So in this 2022 article, let's get back to that. When they adjusted for these lifestyle factors, it attenuated the cardioprotective epidemiological associations with moderate intake. Okay. So that's what they found when they basically controlled for those things. And they said, okay, well, let's take all these, the folks that are living these healthy lifestyles, and kind of, we want to separate that. And when they did, they found the J curve didn't exist. All right. So association with light moderate drinking is still minimal. 16. So this is where I said, like, if you have light to moderate, although it is probably causing a tiny bit of harm, it's probably so tiny you don't need to worry about it. And so if you enjoy your drink, your small amount, you can feel okay that you're not hurting yourself by continuing with it. If you're drinking more than that, you probably should get it less or get rid of it. All right. So 16 people would have to give up alcohol to prevent one case of hypertension. So that these are these like low moderate folks. So if you're a low moderate folk, we need, it's a kind of 16 is our number to treat to prevent one case of hypertension. And of course, hypertension is treatable. So, you know, just because you get hypertension doesn't mean it's necessarily going to kill you. 94 people would have to give up alcohol to prevent one myocardial infarction heart attack. So That's a lot. So these of our light moderate drinkers, um, 1 out of the 94 of you are going to get a heart attack linked to the drinking. So it's like 1%. It's a pretty low risk, right? It's not no risk. So I mean, I would always say like if you can and want to give it up completely, if you are a low light to moderate drinker, I would encourage it. But if it's important to you and you're just a light to moderate drinker and you're willing to take on the risk of this 1 to 94 chance of heart attack and 1 in 16 chance of getting hypertension, um, I think that's certainly something that if you decided you would take that risk, that it wouldn't be a dumb risk to take on, you know, depending on, you know, you have to do your own cost benefit analysis with the data. And if you think, you know what, the cost of me not drinking for a 1 in 94 chance of a heart attack, just not worth it. I want to do the drinking, you know, and that's your decision. But always important to have correct data and not be under this delusion that it's actually benefiting you, because it's not. All right. So the conclusion is that light to moderate use is not cardioprotective. Risk likely goes up at 7 drinks per week and not at 14 drinks per week. So this was the other thing. We thought, oh, when we'd recommend to people, we'd say like, don't drink more than 2 drinks a week. And that was generally for males, whereas females, it was 1 drink per day. Um, so, sorry, that'd be 7 drinks per week for women and 14 for men. And now they're kind of saying 7 across the board. So if you drink 1 drink a day, your risk is in this kind of low, light to moderate risk that's just pretty low, but it's not like it's no risk and it's not like it's an improvement. But once you go over that 7, that's when your risk goes up. And we had previously thought that it was 14 drinks a week. You were kind of, you know, kind of okay until we get to over 14. Well, now we're saying 7. So you have, so light to moderate is really no more than 1 drink. And a lot of people don't know what 1 drink is. 1 drink, and I mean, we'll go into this in detail later, but I'll just kind of throw it out there now. Every country kind of decides what a drink is differently. Interestingly, in the US, the way they measure a drink is actually more. It's, you can drink more and it be considered 1 drink in the US. In us, compared to like Canada, the UK, Australia, Australia is almost half. They consider almost half of what Americans do to be 1 drink. But and 1 drink's not a lot. Okay, so like we're talking about a 5 ounce glass of wine at about 12% alcohol. It's not very much. 1 beer at like 3.5%. Like that's a really low alcohol content beer. And just like 1 12 ounce. Like, I mean, in my opinion, I mean, it's, to me, it's not even worth drinking beer if it's 3.5%. Like, those beers tend to have no taste, and I don't enjoy them. I don't think I've ever had a beer that was that low of alcohol content that I actually was like happy I drank it. I feel like people that drink that kind of beer just drink because they like beer, they like to, and they like to drink a lot. Drinking one of those, not going to be very satisfactory to me. Um, and then 1.5 ounces, so a shot of a 40% liquor. So those are roughly what 1 drink are. And I think, you know, people don't realize, oh man, a beer more than 3.5%, or a can, they have those tall cans, 16%. That's more than a drink, right? And so if you're going to drink that much, you get 7 per week. You can't even do 1 per day. You're going over the line there. So, you know, that's where. So now we've talked about nutrition, we've talked about exercise, we've talked about sleep, we've talked about toxins, and of course there are all the illegal sources of toxins, cocaine, meth, etc. Um, Obviously, stay away from those. We talked about like the legal ones. Um, we'll talk about all the other ones later, and then just to kind of run down the other lifestyle factors, I think probably one of the most important ones is social, and this is becoming a problem recently. Um, the whole loneliness epidemic, and especially with men, men having trouble, especially as adults. making male friends. Um, I would say a lot of men, they make their friends through their female partners. If if we're in a heterosexual relationship here, your female partner, females are a lot more social. That men will meet other men through their partners, and if they don't have a partner, their chances of meeting friends is much lower. We have a lot more people that are single nowadays. Um, so we're having a lot more difficulty here in the social aspect, especially amongst men. We also have a lot of people that are just not interested in having a romantic relationship at all anymore. Like it used to be almost everyone that wanted one before, and now like large percentages not even interested in that. And in a country like Japan, the numbers are even more significant there. And so the social aspect, and we're also losing a lot of our social institutions. So I think about things like church. Even if people are still like believing in things, they're not going to church. Okay. And unless people are believing, and so of course they're not going to go to church because they don't believe in something. um then you've got organizations like the Rotary Club and the Lions Club and like these type of organizations. They're just, people are not joining these anymore. Probably most of the members are like over 80. I think about, I was in the Boy Scouts. It's now called Scouting America. I mean, one reason why they expanded, I think, to girls was because they were losing membership. Like people are not joining that anymore. Team sports, I think, is still pretty. There's a lot of team sports going on, and I think as an adult, you should really be thinking about team sports. Like I think as a kid, that's a big place that we still get a lot of socialization is from team sports, but like not everyone enjoys sports. But if you're an adult that does and you used to play, um I would consider, like, I play hockey, and like the adult hockey kind of infrastructure is, it's massive. I had no idea. I never paid attention to hockey, never played it my whole life, and I got into it and I was like, wow, this adult hockey league is like robust. There are a lot of adults that like to play hockey. So if you're somebody who does, that used to play, um, there's a great opportunity for you to get back into that. Um, and like think of all the benefit you've got, the exercise component and the social component, um, and the stress relief. And then a lot of sports, like getting outside is another factor that's really great. Of course, with hockey, you tend not to be outside unless you're in a really cold place and you can play on a pond. But a lot of other sports, you're outside. Maybe not. Basketball is something you could do inside or outside. And so I would, soccer is something that most people can do, softball. Um, I would consider sports because I think sports are probably one of our best things we have left in society that people actually do. Whereas we're losing a lot of these like social organizations, we're losing like the Boy Scouts, we're losing churches, attendance, just people are, social media, and social media does not help you socialize at all. If anything, it makes things way worse. Like I heard this statistic, it was something like, I forget, like certain age men, it was like half or more had never asked a woman out ever. And it's like, I just can't imagine. Like I'm 47, and I don't know anyone my age that when we were that age that had never asked a woman out. Like I just, and people just aren't doing it anymore, right? Like they're getting satisfied, or I guess they think they're satisfied through online things or AI, and this stuff is poisoning them. All right, like that's my opinion. Like this is a huge problem, and so like we need, like, I think sports is one great thing that's still out there. Um, it can be tougher. I think for a lot of people, it's just easier to just like go online and do the online thing. And so, the social aspect is so massive for your improved mental health, and also like um, your metabolic health and everything as well, of course, right? Because if you're not leaving your room, you're not moving around either. You're not using your brain, you're not using your body. Like you're just kind of sitting there like a blob. Like find something, find something to do. All right. So the social piece, I think that's huge. And then like the education piece, like I think just learning new things or like practicing your craft if you have one, if you have like a specific craft, like, and like that doesn't have to be necessarily a job. It could be like an art or like a woodworking or any kind of thing where you're like making things, doing things, learning more about things, or just reading. Reading is great. People don't read anymore. They don't read books. Uh, I think that's another massive thing that we're experiencing is this like kind of people don't read books anymore. There's huge loss to that. So like just educating yourself, and there's so many ways you can do it. Stress control. Um, you know, y we're under a lot of stress nowadays, and so this is where therapy can really help. And so like this is another big lifestyle factor. And then like I said, getting outside I think is huge. I think just go there. Just get outside. Find something to do out there. Whether it's gardening or some sort of hobby or some sort of like craft that you're doing or athletic pursuit or just like a walking the dog kind of thing. Going outside is massive. So that for me, those are the lifestyle factors. It's what you're putting in your body, whether it's a toxin or if it's food, what you're doing with your body, exercise, movement, educating yourself, your relationships with other people, stress, going out, stress management, going outside. And I think if you're wondering like, why is my mental health not getting better, why am I not losing weight, are you neglecting one of these factors? And that's, you may be like, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing it. Are you neglecting one of these factors? That could be the factor that's causing your problem. And so um, I've given you a lot of information on some of these topics, and I just kind of ran through the last of them there in about 10 minutes. Um, but those are the things that I would focus on. And so that actually wraps up the entire lifestyle medicine piece of our kind of mental health obesity series. And I'm going to be moving more into the medical space from the lifestyle space. And we're going to talk about next time, we're going to talk about, and I'm probably going to do these episodes right in a row. I am going to be traveling to China, and it is hard to access the internet from there. So I'm going to see if I can put these episodes out. Otherwise, there might be a gap, which you won't know about until after it airs, of course. But we're going to talk about how to assess for obesity. Like before we start the treatment, how do we do the assessment? That's what we're going to talk about next time. So I want to thank you all for joining me, and I will see you next time.